Indeed, it's going to be a busy week in Abuja. They're discussing energy. And yes, we're discussing energy this morning, but this time let's look at electricity. And yesterday, the federal government has said that they will share the burden of electricity subsidy with the state government. And so they're going to take a chunk of about 3.6 trillion naira from the federation account before it is shared. That's what they'll be doing from this year, 2026, 2027, and 2028. And they said this is to distribute financial burden across federal, state, and local governments. Let's find out how this could look like, or how this would look like. And we're doing this with the Director, West Power and Gas Limited, Mr. George Etomi. Mr. Etomi, good morning, and good to have you on the program. I think you should unmute, because I didn't hear you even though I saw your lip.
Yeah, good morning.
All right, great. I can hear you now. So what is this supposed to mean? Because we're fighting subsidy removal because of what the hike it will bring to tariffs for consumers. Now, if this is taken from FARC, that means there's less money going to the subnationals. But I mean, what's the workability looking like from your perspective?
Well, the devil will be in the details, but the principle here is that the subsidy regime is becoming a huge burden on the federal government, and yet the benefits go to all the states. So what the government seeks to do at this point is to ensure that that burden is shared. And they will do it up front, because once before FARC is done, they will do the reconciliation, and they will do the deductions. Well, let's just sort of go a little bit back. Following the Electricity Act of 2023, which essentially decentralized the value chain, the entire value chain, states can now generate, transmit, and distribute their electricity. States that are ready have about 18 of them to date have set up their electricity laws, and they've also set up their electricity regulatory mechanisms. So what that means is that the states are increasingly participating in this value chain. And so this whole issue of subsidy, which is arising on account of the shortfall between the cost of the production of electricity and the revenue that's generated by the distribution companies, is being borne up to this point by the federal government. And if states are now participating in it, it is only proper that they should also bear a part of that subsidy. So this is the thrust of the federal government move. Now, what we may ask would be, how would that practically affect states? First of all, it means their total revenues from FARC will reduce, which also means that they must set up regulatory outfits that ensure that they attract investors into their domains. 3, they must ensure that the distribution companies which serve their areas are put in a position to generate sufficient enough revenue to feed the market. There will always be a subsidy, let's get that correct. But what you want to do is to reduce the gap between the cost of production and what you're able to collect from consumers. Then 4, they will then decide the best way to distribute this subsidy. Currently, as you know, there are 4 electricity bands for tariffs. Tariff band A is the one that on paper is not being subsidized, but all the other bands are being subsidized. How you work that in to ensure that mismatch is also addressed is going to be one of the key things. So it actually calls for robust regulation on the part of states. But I must warn that states that are not financially strong or disciplined will have a big problem. Some states can survive this because they can create the enabling environment to deal with this subsidy removal. But many states will not be able to do so. And that's my worry. What will then happen is that investors will then be attracted only to those states where they have assurances that they will get a fair return on their investments. So this could lead to some inequity in the availability of this resource, which is so critical to the diversification of this economy.
I wanted to ask if this would mean that consumers can now be a little bit relieved, but it sounds from the explanation you've given that this is not even a sustainable way for subsidy, electricity subsidy.
Well, like I said, more thoughts would have to be put through it. I'm sure by the time they set up the agencies to look at how it can practically work, they will look at the pros and the cons and see what can be done. I just sort of foresee many states going back up in hand to the federal government to plead for assistance, because the removal upfront from the FAC allocation for electricity subsidy will hurt some states more than it will hurt the others. But like I mentioned to you, if we do not have a robust plan to look at why this subsidy is necessary in the first place and how it is managed, it is simply shifting the problem and not solving it. Let us go back. Why do we have that? You don't have sufficient enough gas. I'm happy there's a conference going on where they're talking about new gas finds. We don't have enough gas for power. And the gas for power we have is benchmarked with the international pricing, which means that if you do not subsidize it, and that's a pass-through cost straight to the consumer won't be able to afford that cost. That's why the government steps in. The reason you have this accumulation over the years is because the federal government wasn't able to address the problem. And it set off a chain reaction. You don't settle me, I don't produce gas. You don't have gas, the grid collapses. So it's just sort of a mishmash of different disproportionate interaction within the value chain. So that fundamental issue needs to be addressed. There needs to be sufficiency first before you then begin to look at what truly is available and what is not available. Secondly, you have to look at how states can have the same degree of discipline. Privatization started in 2013. NEC was a major regulator. Over the period, NEC has become very robust and on top of their business. I can't say that for state regulators, who still need in some cases to be handheld. And more importantly, it is important that the state governments do not interfere in the way these state regulators regulate their business. So, and we see that from time to time, where governments just willy-nilly sack state regulators. That will never breed market confidence, because once there's no market confidence, it means the investors will not come in. So there's a lot to unload and unpack, but the principle is that something just needs to be done. The federal government is simply tired to carry this burden alone.
All right, Mr. Itomi, looking at it, I mean, you've talked about the possibility of the federal government subsidizing gas for ample supply. But when we look at it from the states, since they are now empowered, and you even noted how 18 of them, that's 18 states, have now domesticated the law, there's also the option of renewables. Can't we explore the state's part even more? Especially, you have a lot of private sector businesses and individuals who are interested in renewables, especially solar. Can't we come from that aspect to ensure surplus for us to be able to deal with this issue of subsidy and pricing?
Yes, Ini, you're absolutely right. And part of, I'm sure, if you follow the energy summit that's going on, it's how you can create an energy mix. Before, if you remember, gas was supposed to be a transition fuel to to clean energy, but I think the world is beginning to understand that an energy mix is what we should be talking about. So yes, Nigeria has not been so strong on clean energy, but now we're beginning to look more into that area. Yes, states regulators or state governments should look increasingly into how they can generate clean electricity. Solar is, of course, one source. Hydro is another, by the way. Hydrogen is a little bit far-fetched, such as wind, but yes, those are alternatives to gas-fueled electricity. And every state must look at their comparative advantage and concentrate in that area. It's all about creating the enabling environment. The people who will bring in the money will come in once they are sure that their investment is secure and they can get a fair return. So put it this way, the race has begun. States must belt up. This issue of going cap in hand, like for everything to the federal government, what they've just closed one veritable channel for that. And states must begin to look inward to ensure that they create large electricity, robust electricity markets that will serve the needs of their populace in an affordable manner. Affordability is so important. And that's why you must match the cost with the collections. So this is really what so we now have electricity markets, period. That's what's going on. And states must begin to live up to the game.
All right, Mr. Itomi, thank you so much for always bringing your perspective to this issue of electricity. Mr. George Itomi is a director of West Power and Gas Limited. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Ine.